Hey, what's up guys? So in this video we're going to be testing out all of the top laser jammers against all of the top laser guns and see which jammer is really the very best performing laser jammer available on the market. Now taking a look at our lineup of laser jammers, we've got everything from the ALP, the anti-laser priority with two different combinations. We're going to try it with 3 regular heads as well as 2 regular heads plus a TX head in the center, see which one performs better. We're going to be taking a look at the Escort Shifter Max. We've got the new Stinger fiber jammers. We've got the K40 diffuser optics, the TMG Alpha 15, plus a new motorcycle specific laser jammer from Adaptive. All of the laser jammers are production jammers running the latest firmware, and I'm going to install them all on my car and run them back to back and see which ones work the best. Now, as far as the different guns, everybody always wants to know about the Dragon Eye, so we've got not 1, but 3 different Dragon Eyes. Now, there's actually many different versions of the Dragon Eye that may all look similar externally, but under the hood they actually operate very differently. We've got a Dragon Eye Compact, which was manufactured in January of 2018. We've got a Dragon Eye Speed LiDAR, which was manufactured in April of 2016, but has since been recertified with new firmware. And then we also have an older Laser Ally, which has also been recertified with new Speed LiDAR firmware to make it much more difficult to jam, but unfortunately that one we only got to test with a little bit because it actually wound up dying during testing, so ultimately we've only got 2 that we're going to be able to run for the full test. Now, Dragon Eyes, they're only used in a couple different states and not everywhere in the state. I'll put the current list up on screen. Now, the guns that are used more commonly, as far as the medium difficulty guns, we've got the LTI TrueSpeed S, the Stalker XLR, and finally we've got a relatively easy to jam gun, the Custom Pro Laser 3, and it's one that's used all over the country. Now, as far as the jammers, they're all going to be installed into the grille area of my vehicle. They're all going to be set up as a set of triples, so 3 heads for my SUV, with the exception of the Adaptive TPX motorcycle jammer. That one, it's only available with 2 heads. It's designed for motorcycle installation, and so to simulate a motorcycle, I actually installed 2 heads up front near the license plate, and we're just going to be testing the center. Now, as far as the places of the car that we're going to be shooting the primary target areas that police officers will be hitting with their laser guns. We've got the driver's headlight, we've got center mass, where the front plate is sometimes used, as well as the passenger headlight. All of the laser jammers are going to get shot by every single gun in all 3 areas. Now, the objective for the jammers is to never ever allow a reading from the laser guns. Ideally, it's going to be able to jam all the way from the far end of the course, which is about 1,200 feet or so, plus minus depending on when the shooter actually pulls the trigger, all the way down to 0 feet. If the laser gun is able to overcome the jammer, that's called a punch through. And I'm going to show you guys the distance on when the gun is able to get a punch through. Sometimes there's an instant punch through where the jammer's not able to work at all. Sometimes it's going to be able to go all the way where you can jam all the way to the gun. We call that jam to gun. In practice, you don't actually want to do that. In practice, when you get shot with laser and the alarms start going off, you want to quickly slow down and disable your jammers and allow the officer to get a reading of you doing the speed limit. You don't actually want to jam all the way down to the police officer. It's actually one of the most important things to know about using a laser jammer. But for testing purposes, we actually try to see if the gun is able to get a punch through at any point. Now, for this video, that's what I'm going to be focusing on, strictly the performance of the laser jammers. This is not going to be a comparison review between the different jammers. I am going to be covering that as well, and that's going to go into more detail regarding interface, functionality, capabilities, things like that. But first and foremost, the most important thing with the laser jammer is its performance. If it can't jam a laser gun, who cares about the rest, you know? So let's go ahead and focus on performance here. We'll do a follow-up video that kind of compares this stuff in more detail. But let's go ahead and take a look at the best laser jammers available on the market. We'll start with the worst performing laser jammer, and we're going to work all the way up to the best performing jammer. Now, starting off in 6th place, we've got the K40 diffuser optics attached to the RL360Di. Now, with the K40, it was not able to even detect either the Dragon Eyes that we tested against. Every other laser jammer that we tested with could detect and also jam to some extent the different Dragon Eye guns. With the K40, we got no alert whatsoever. Now, here's a quick demo so you can see for yourself. We'll go ahead and hit the K40 with the Dragon Eye Compact first. You'll notice when we do that, we can target the heads directly and we're going to get no alerts. However, if we hit it with the PL3, laser, it goes off instantly. Switch back over to the Dragon Eye. No alert, PL3. Now this was kind of surprising, but kind of not, but K40 does advertise DragonEye jamming capabilities. Now, to be fair, there's many different versions of the DragonEye that all vary under the hood. There's not just the DragonEye, there's many different versions. And for example, PY004 on the forums recently tested a K40 diffuser optics, a set of duals, and he tested it against a DragonEye compact like this and found against center mass it was almost completely able to jam the gun. It was able to detect and it was able to jam. Against the headlights, it was pretty much instant punch through though. To be fair, that was only a set of duals, not triples, but nevertheless, there is some sense of detecting and jamming that K40 has, but compared to the competition, it does not offer proper protection against the DragonEye. It's pretty much the worst compared to all of the other jammers. Now, even against some of the easier to jam guns, if you take a look at the Pro Laser 3, for example, it was able to jam this one consistently, which is awesome. However, if you take a look at some of the medium difficulty guns like the Stalker XLR or the TrueSpeed S, against those guns we were seeing punch throughs in the 400 to 600 foot range. And so while yes, it could offer some protection, it's not going to be giving you a consistent level of protection across the board against a variety of different guns. Now, one other point I wanted to mention real quick is because the testing was actually going faster than expected, because the jammer wasn't even detecting any of the DragonEye guns, we decided to try a couple other things. The first thing is we tried actually disabling the anti-jamming capabilities on the DragonEye, and once we did that, the K40 was indeed able to detect the DragonEye and it was able to jam it. The other thing was Me Is My Name. He brought his LTI Ultralight 100 LR. It's really similar to the LRB, which I have right there in the background of my videos. Older gun, relatively easy to jam, and luckily the K40 was also able to jam that gun as well. So once we start kind of simplifying things for the K40, it does do better, but with its inability to detect the DragonEye whatsoever, the only jammer to do that, plus it's struggling even on the mid-tier guns, it comes in last place. Now, this is actually pretty similar to how it handled in terms of radar detection with the RL360Di that I had done the week before. With the RL360Di, it came in last or second to last, pretty much bottom of the pack performance compared to all of the other custom installed radar detectors. So when it comes to the K40, I'm not impressed either on its radar side or its laser side, and so it comes in last place, and in this case, 6th place. Now, moving on to 5th place. In 5th place, we have, kind of surprisingly, the Escort Shifter Max attached to the Max CI360. Now, I was actually expecting a little bit better performance, but the main issue that I was noticing, well, there were two issues. The first thing was when I shot it with the DragonEye, it would actually report those alerts as rear alerts, even though I only had jammers hooked up to the front. Now, this was really weird, so I started doing some troubleshooting on site and checking the dip switches on the CPU to make sure they weren't accidentally set to rear. They were all set to front, and so I tried switching them maybe to rear and then back to front in case they weren't locked in properly, still having the issue. I wasn't able to resolve this issue, so I actually got in touch with Escort and started doing some troubleshooting on site. They had recommended that I do a complete factory reset of the detector and then let it sit for about 10 minutes or so that the laser jammers can actually communicate with and initialize with the CPU itself. And so we did that over the lunch break. And then once the lunch break was done, we reconfigured the jammer and then started testing again. But unfortunately, I still kept seeing it alerting to the rear even though we were shooting the front. The other issue was before I'd reset the detector, if you take a look at the results, we were getting a lot of punch throughs with the jammer. We were getting punch throughs 600, 700, 900 feet away, and the course was only 1,200 feet long. So it was only able to jam for a short period of time, even though I had it set up in unlimited jamming mode. I was able to get it to jam to gun with the PL3, and it was almost jam to gun, maybe 400 foot punch through with the TrueSpeed S, but really not what I was expecting. So anyway, we threw out all these results, did the factory reset, and started over again. Now, once we started over, we were still seeing a bunch of punch throughs with the DragonEyes, especially off on the headlights. With the PL3 and the Stalker XLR, it was doing well there, jam to gun, which is awesome. With the TrueSpeed S, though, we were still getting punch throughs with the headlights here, which was really surprising. A good capable jammer at this point should be able to jam not only the DragonEye, but really the TrueSpeed S. Now, I know that Escort is actually working on updated firmware to help jam the DragonEye and improve the DragonEye jamming capabilities. I don't know if that's also going to affect the TrueSpeed S jamming, but it's something that they were hoping to have available before I actually did my test, and me too. I wouldn't want to go out and do a test and then immediately afterwards, a new firmware update comes out and renders all my results invalid, So I was running with the latest firmware, 1.10, the one that adds the auto JTK support. Now, firmware updates from Escort traditionally are very slow. With their previous gen, the LSPs, we never saw a single update. There have been more updates with the Maxi i360 and the Shifter Max, which is good, but I'm still not seeing solid Dragoneye jamming capabilities. Now, with the whole front-rear confusion stuff, I was still seeing the issue with the Dragoneye. Once or twice I saw it on some of the other guns. I thought maybe there was a malfunction with my unit, or maybe only some of the heads operating, but not the others, so I couldn't really tell what was going on. Now, after the test, I came back, I posted the results on the forum, and other people have also been reporting this issue with the TrueSpeed S. I talked to Escort about this, and they followed up with their engineers who were also able to confirm that against certain versions of the Dragoneye, there will be some confusion with what direction that it reports. So this is not something limited to just my unit. Other customers and Escort themselves have been able to confirm this issue as well. So it's definitely a bug with the unit, and hopefully it's something that Escort is able to resolve in a future firmware update. But in its current form, with the jamming capabilities that it offers, it winds up in 5th place. Now, moving on to the next jammer. In 4th place, we have the TMG Alpha 15. Now, this is a jammer that's been popularly talked about on the forums, and it's kind of a less expensive option that's coming out that should also still be able to jam the Dragoneye. Now, from what I've seen and from what I've heard from TMG and looking at other tests, it should be able to jam with a good installation down to about 300 feet or so against the different Dragoneyes, but that's not what I saw. In my testing against the Dragoneyes, I was getting punch-throughs at 500 feet, 700 feet, 900 feet. Again, the test course was only about 1,200 feet long or so. And so, yes, it would give you maybe a couple seconds of time to slow down, but it's not one that's able to jam the Dragoneye very well. And again, this is different than what I was expecting and what we were being told. Now, I talked with Jag42, who's the US distributor of the TMG, and he's been doing a lot of testing. And he's very familiar with the system, and he had suggested that my head placement, the outer heads should actually be pushed closer out towards the headlights, and then the center head should actually be pushed a little bit lower down towards the front plate. I could see this being helpful maybe to get them a little bit closer to the target areas, but moving the heads apart, I could see it actually having some issues. I mean, the biggest punch through that I saw, for example, with the Dragoneye Speed LiDAR was in center mass, and if you start moving the heads farther away, that's only going to be making it tougher for the jammer. Now, again, PY004 recently did some similar testing to where he saw some similar issues on a car, and his heads, I think, were about 25 inches apart, and they were suggesting they need to be at least 28 inches apart. So he pushed them a little bit farther away, and what he saw with taking his heads and actually moving them closer to the headlights is that that did improve the jamming for the headlights a little bit, but then it would heavily compromise the performance of the front license plate shooting. And so kind of what I'm seeing with the TMG is from previous tests, we know that the heads are not very sensitive. In fact, they're way less sensitive than other heads like the ALP, which means they're just going to struggle to see the signal in the first place. So if you start moving them farther apart, a jammer can't jam something that it can't see. And I think this is probably one of the biggest issues with the TMG is its lack of receive sensitivity. And if you only have 3 heads, you're kind of limited. And I think some of the results that I've been seeing, it works better on maybe a smaller car as opposed to an SUV. Maybe if you put a 4th head on the front of the vehicle, that could help, but then that starts to kind of chip away at the whole slight price advantage that you have with the TMG. So I'm not particularly impressed with its Dragoneye jamming capabilities. They are working on an updated center head, kind of like ALP has with their new TX sensor that should help with the Dragoneye jamming. TMG is also working on that, a new head for variable pulse rate guns, or VPR guns. That's still very much under development. It's still in the works. It's not available yet, but I'm hoping that that's able to help the TMG get to a very solid and consistently solid ability to jam the Dragoneyes. So as you can see from the results, it does a good job against the PL3, the TrueSpeed S, and the Stalker XLR, which these types of guns are actually what most people are going to be seeing. And so it's a capable jammer that has some degree of Dragoneye jamming capability depending on the placement and size of your vehicle and how many heads you have and whatnot. But I'm not seeing the level of protection that I would want. And so for that reason, even though it's a very capable jammer against easy and mid-tier jammers, because it's still not offering solid, consistent, reliable jamming against the Dragoneye, it comes in 4th place. Now, moving on, in third place, we have the new Adaptive TPX motorcycle specific laser jammer. Now, this laser jammer, it's designed specifically for motorcycles, not for cars. It only supports 3 heads max, 2 in the front and 1 in the rear. I installed the 2 heads up in front, and I placed them just on top of the license plate on either side of the top corners of the plate, similar to where they'd be installed on a motorcycle. And then I only tested center mass, just shooting the front plate, kind of simulating a motorcycle installation. Something else that I found is because the cables are all really short, I couldn't run it all the way into the cabin, so I actually had to install it in my engine bay. Now, another thing, because it's meant for motorcycles, it's got ports in the CPU to where you can plug in an external LED that would run to your handlebars, as well as an audio output so you could plug it into your helmet. Now, I'm not wearing a motorcycle helmet while I'm driving my car, so I wasn't able to hear the alerts and I wasn't able to see them, so we just installed it on the car, ran some runs, and here's what we saw. Now, taking a look at the results, as you can see, it did very well against the PL3, the Stalker XLR, and the LTI TrueSpeed S. Jammed a gun, no speed readings whatsoever. Awesome. Against the Dragoneye Compact, it jammed all the way down to about 200 feet or so. It did struggle against the Dragoneye Speed LiDAR, but this is really impressive here with just 2 heads. Again, all the other jammers are running 3 heads. This one is the only one running 2. Now, because it was performing so well, we decided to just try for kicks. It was such a short test, you know. We just figured we'd try maybe shooting the headlights as well and see what happens. Now remember, we only have 2 heads right by the front plate, and unlike all the other laser jammers, there are no other jammers that are close to the headlights. Nevertheless, it did better than I expected. Against the Pro Laser 3, it went completely jammed a gun, even on the headlights. It did start to struggle against the TrueSpeed S with punch-throughs in the 500 to 600 foot range, but that's kind of understandable considering the setup. And surprisingly, it actually did pretty well against the Dragoneye too. It was still able to jam down to 400, 500, 600 feet or so, which again, there's no jammer heads up there by the headlights, and we're only running 2 heads, not 3, unlike the other jammers. So very promising results so far from this new motorcycle-specific laser jammer. Now, the jammer only has the option for 2 heads up front. There is an option to do a 3rd head. I asked about actually running it on the front, but the laser jammer is really not designed for automotive applications and doing 3 jammers up front. And so we tried just for kicks, maybe doing the 3rd head, the rear head, we tried doing it up front just as a single head, and it actually had some semblance of Dragoneye jamming. Now, I don't actually remember when the shooter started shooting, so it might have just been a short range run, and really the jammer is not designed for jamming the Dragoneye in the rear with 1 head. It should be able to handle some of the more basic guns, but it does a better job with 2 heads up front. Now, that said, for those of you guys who want a motorcycle-specific laser jammer, it's currently available for pre-order. I'll put a link down in the video description to where you can get one, plus some discount codes and whatnot that they provided to me to share with you guys. But yeah, that's going to be shipping up pretty soon, and it's cool to now start seeing a motorcycle-specific application that actually works pretty well here, so good job, Adaptive. Now, moving on to the next laser jammer. In second place, we have the Stinger Fiber Jammers. These new jammers have really teeny tiny fiber optic heads that are super small. There's individual heads for the transmit and the receive side, and for those of you guys looking for the most hidden and impossible to spot laser jammer, this is the one to get. Because the heads are so small, you can drill these tiny holes in your car to install the heads there, or you can stick them into air intakes in a way that wouldn't be possible with the traditional laser jammer, or maybe if your car isn't conducive to installing a traditional laser jammer head in the first place, the Stinger Fiber should be able to be installed on almost every single car. Now, I've tested some of Stinger's previous jammers, and honestly, I wasn't impressed with the performance or the consistency of the performance. This is Stinger's first jammer that I've actually been impressed with. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at the results. Now, as you can see, this jammer actually does surprisingly well. It's able to jam some of the easier to jam guns, but it's also able to jam the Dragoneye as advertised. Now, you'll notice if you take a look at the results here, there are some punch throughs. Let's actually go ahead and talk about those quickly. Now, with the fiber heads, they're super small, and what I was thinking initially to attach them onto my car for testing was just to tape them in place onto my grill, but when I did that, I found they moved a little bit too much and they weren't quite aligned properly and they wouldn't stay properly when I was driving. And so what I did for testing is we actually used some of the foam that the jammer shipped with and inserted the jammer heads into the foam and then attached the foam to my vehicle using double stick tape and zip ties, and this actually worked pretty well. Now that said, we saw some unexpected punch throughs with the jammer. It would typically go jam to gun, but then sometimes, for example, we would see with the PL3, we'd get a punch through around 288 feet on the passenger headlight side. So we went over to the jammers on that side of the car and I noticed the heads were not actually pointed forward. They were kind of pointed off to the side a little bit. And so we fixed the heads and just pointed them straight again, and then boom, all of a sudden it went jam to gun. I had a punch through with the TrueSpeed S, about 700 feet. And when I looked at those two, I noticed the zip ties were kind of squeezing the foam, and so the heads were actually kind of pointed out to the side a little bit. We adjusted the heads and pointed them straight again, and then sure enough, we reran it, jam to gun performance. And so alignment with the stingers is definitely very important, just like with every laser jammer. With Stinger, you want them not just mounted straight and level like typical, but with the fibers, Stinger actually recommends a 5-degree tilt up, which is kind of unusual and atypical, but that's what they recommend for best performance. Now, as far as placing the jammers on the car, they recommended that I actually install the outer heads underneath the headlight in the panel gap between the headlight and the body panel. Now, there's no way that I could actually go and install my heads in that place for testing, which is actually why we kind of moved it just a little bit and it still performed well, but that's what they recommended, is just inserting it in the panel gaps. Now, for a professional to do that, they have to obviously pull the panel off and start drilling. I'm not really sure how you would go and angle the heads. Like, we had a tough enough time in installation because all you can see is just the tip of the fiber head to tell if it was straight or not. We actually wound up in testing having to stick the heads out a little bit so that we could tell whether or not they were straight or what direction they were pointed in. I have no idea how you're actually going to do that for the professional installation, but I guess that's what professionals are for, is to figure out all those kind of nuances, drilling into body panels or headlights or however this works. But yeah, typically for the installations, I actually see they drill into the grill somewhere and they install them there, or you can install them into an air intake or something. But yeah, if you're looking for high quality jammers that perform well and your car really isn't conducive to installing a traditional laser jammer, or you want something super hidden and stealth, the Stinger fibers look to be an awesome option, and unlike the previous jammers, these ones are the real deal. Now, they are expensive. They're roughly double the price of a comparably equipped ALP, so they're not cheap. But if you're looking for the tiny heads just to make a super stealth option, Stinger's jammers, this could now be a viable option. And now finally, moving on to the best performing laser jammer on the market. The champion of this test is, unsurprisingly, the Anti-Laser Priority.
Dragoneye, ahead.
Now, this isn't really a surprise. I mean, this has for years been the best performing jammer on the market, and maybe some of the other jammers can come close, but they still can't compete with the ALP. And to show you, let's go ahead and start diving into the results. Now, as far as the results, I tested a couple different configurations just to see, again, with the ALP, what works best. I wanted to try 2 different configurations. I wanted to try 3 regular heads up front, and I wanted to try 2 regular heads plus a center TX head. Now, the TX head, as we know, it's designed to help improve Dragoneye jamming capabilities, which is awesome, but I don't actually face the Dragoneye around here, and I was curious if switching over to the TX head and losing the additional receiver, the TX is transmit only, the regular heads transmit and receive, if I would lose the additional receiver, would that mean I would start getting punch throughs on the maybe other guns other than the Dragoneye? And so that's actually something I wanted to test. And so starting off with the results, as you can see with the 3 regular heads, the ALP did excellent. It was jammed a gun against the PL3, the TrueSpeed S, the Stalker XLR. Even against the Dragoneye, it's already performing better than any other jammer that we've tested, and this isn't even its optimal configuration. We're getting some punch throughs around maybe only 150 feet or maybe just under 400 feet. So yes, there are some punch throughs, but still it did really well, especially considering we're not using a TX head. Now, once I switched the center head over to the TX, the ALP started performing even better. We were finding that it was jamming pretty much everything. It jammed PL3, TrueSpeed S, XLR, as well as all the Dragoneyes. And this was also one of the tests we did. It was actually at the very beginning of the day where we tested the Laser Ally that was converted into a Dragoneye speed lidar. Unfortunately, that one died after testing, but yeah, the ALP was able to jam even that gun, which is one that is known for kind of ripping up not perfect installations, which is actually something I was kind of worried about with my car, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Well, actually, let's go ahead and dive into that because I think that'll be a good topic. You see, it did awesome here in this test, but I wasn't necessarily confident that it would do that. In fact, I was actually losing a little bit of sleep the night before the test. You see, my heads are actually slightly recessed into my grill. They're not completely flush with the front of it, which is usually not recommended because that can actually cause some issues with the laser jammer to where it's actually picking up its own reflections off the grill that come back into the laser jammer head. Now, for aesthetic purposes, we decided to actually bring the heads back just a little bit, especially because I wanted to put these removable Perspex covers in front of the laser jammer heads. Now, doing that could cause problems with the laser jammer to where it would actually mess up the results, and I would start to see incorrect results essentially just due to my installation that would cause problems for all the jammers. And I've been sitting here thinking, well, my rear heads are not really recessed, so those could perform better, or we had a bunch of other people come to the test, theirs could perform better than mine, and so we could see the difference between recessed heads and not recessed heads. That's cool, but then I would have to go back and get my heads fixed and be kind of a pain in the butt. Luckily, once we got to testing, the heads did awesome, even though they were slightly recessed. And so while it's still not a good general practice, in this instance, testing was able to confirm that they worked out well, so that's good news. Now, speaking of those removable Perspex covers that I wanted to put in front of the heads, for stealth purposes, we actually wanted to use Perspex. It's a special type of plastic that looks black to the naked eye, but it actually allows infrared light to pass through in both directions. So the laser gun's beam can pass through to hit the laser jammer, and then the laser jammer is able to detect that and then fire back to the laser gun without the Perspex actually hindering its performance. Now, it does block a little bit of light, but there's still plenty to go on there to where even with the slight impact of performance, I was really curious to see, well, would we actually notice that in testing? And now for most people, they don't make the covers removable. They just put them in place, they're solid, they're locked into place, and they're done. For my car, because I'm designing everything here specifically for testing and comparison purposes, I wanted to have the option to actually remove the different Perspex heads. Now the way that we did that is for the outer heads, they put magnets on the side so I could just pop it right onto the front or pop it off as needed. For the front center cluster, because there were more jammer heads there, we actually designed them so they clip onto the side instead of being held on by magnets, just to have a more secure fit. Now for the rear outer heads, we actually used a pressure fit to where it slides onto the outside and then it just grabs it and holds on thanks to friction. For the rear TX head, there was no Perspex covers at all because the head is already so tiny all just by itself. Now, because the covers are removable, we were able to do some A/B testing to see if we saw a difference with the covers and without them, and well, let's go ahead and take a look at the results with the covers on. Taking a look at the front, testing with 2 regular heads and 1 TX head as we found to be the optimal combination of my vehicle, it went jammed a gun across the board. Switching over to the rear heads to where we had Perspex on the outer heads and not on the TX sensor, again, jammed a gun across the board. Fantastic performance, and it did awesome against every single gun, which is just wonderful to see. And now that that's there, I don't plan on actually removing my Perspex because obviously it looks a lot better with it on. That's the whole reason to do it. The installers that I had it done, the guys at Music Car Northwest in Portland, they said it was the first time they've ever done removable Perspex. Most everybody just has it permanently attached, and for good reason. As we can see in testing, we were able to confirm that, yeah, it definitely performs well. Something I do want to mention, though, is once we were testing, we actually saw a surprising punch-through with the ProLaser 3, no less. We got a punch-through at 480 feet when everything else was going jammed a gun. And we were wondering if maybe it had to do with the power source. You see, every gun was actually powered by a battery, with the exception of the ProLaser 3, which had a cigarette lighter power. And for testing purposes, I just plugged it into a USB battery pack. That way it would be more portable. And we were wondering maybe that had something to do with things. And so we switched it around and plugged it into a 12-volt cigarette lighter outlet in a vehicle and retested. And then once we did that, it went jammed a gun. Now, I don't know if it was a random fluke punch through or if it was something related to the power source. But nevertheless, otherwise, even including that, the ALP still did a really good job. Yes, there was a punch through there. I'm not really sure why, but I do think that it's worth mentioning. Now, something we're finding with the ALP is testing with it can honestly be kind of boring. I mean, you can just keep doing runs back and forth, and it's just jammed a gun, jammed a gun, jammed a gun, jammed a gun, and you don't get any reading. And so it gets kind of boring. I mean, that's good, of course, for the jamming capabilities, but it does make the testing kind of boring. So that was actually kind of something else kind of interesting. But as far as getting that kind of performance, we're finding that that's not always going to happen. As I mentioned, there were a bunch of other people who came with their ALPs as well. Most everybody who came to help is also running ALPs. Now what's great is they were all driving different cars with different head combinations and head counts and placements, and down in the video description I'll link to all the results from their testing so you can take a look. But in short, something interesting we found, and it's something that we've seen in previous testing as well, is that the placement of the heads is really critical. If the heads are maybe slightly towed in or out, or if they're pointed a little bit up and down, that can actually lead to punch throughs. And so it really is important with the ALP, just like with every laser jammer, to ensure that they really are pointed straight and level. And all these kind of little details, there's a number of really important things that you need to know to make sure that your jammers can work to their optimal capabilities. And it's for that reason that on my website, I'll link to this as well, just like everything else, tons of links in the video description. I've got a setup guide that goes over everything you need to know for the ALP, everything as far as how many heads to get, where they should be installed in your car, how they should be oriented, how you update your jammers, how you configure them and set them up, how you test, etc. There's going to be another link down there with a bunch of information, pretty much my ALP setup guide. And so if you want an ALP, definitely read over that. It's going to go over a ton of information that I've been putting together over the years as far as how to set up the jammer. And a lot of that stuff also applies to other jammers, but there's going to be a few differences here and there. Anyway, yeah, as you can see, yet again, ALP wins as far as being the best performing laser jammer on the market. Not really a huge surprise, but it's good to finally have a level playing field with all of the different jammers installed on the same vehicle against a bunch of different guns and actually get a good test to see, which one performs the best. So thanks so much to everybody who helped me do this test. There's no way I could have done this without you guys. We tested all day long. We met up at 9:30 a.m. and testing didn't finish until 8 p.m. So a lot of stuff that we got done. Thanks to the manufacturers for sending over equipment. Thanks to you guys on the forums for sending over guns for me to borrow to actually conduct this test. And so this really was a big collaborative effort, and thanks to everybody who helped actually make this happen. Other than that, I plan on doing some additional follow-up videos kind of going over, other than jamming stuff aside, how they compare in terms of features and interface and usability and pricing and all that kind of stuff. I want to go into a lot more detail. Even though ALPs are the best in terms of performance, sometimes people may want something very specific, like maybe the Stingers, you want the tiny heads, or you need the motorcycle specific ones. Sometimes there's little things here and there that some people may actually want to get a different jammer, maybe integration with a different radar detector or whatever. And so I want to go into more detail actually comparing the different laser jammers as well. So taking a look at all the best laser jammers, the best custom installed radar detectors, and the best windshield mount radar detectors. Now that all this testing is wrapping up, time to go ahead and get into the big comparison reviews next. So awesome, that's going to be coming soon. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.